It's Friday, Feedback Friday, the feedbackiest day of the week. It's Feedback Friday. You guys are probably sick of seeing me this week. I've done like 8 hours of freaking content or something like that this week. But, it was E3, so that's the way it rolls. I'm going to do this before I forget. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron, patreon.com/Leanna K. I didn't make any advertising revenue off the E3 stuff because everything got copyright striked. One just broke the camel's back. I talked about this on Wednesday when I got back my live streaming privileges. Yes, they did come back. Everybody seemed to come back, of course, after all the press conferences were over. And I was telling the patrons on the Patreon only video yesterday that, the fact that this channel is predominantly Patreon supported means, hey, if I get shut down on YouTube, I just move over to Twitch and no problems. I kind of liked doing Twitch. I'd been resistant to it for a really long time because of the show your boobs culture over there. I didn't want my stuff to be misconstrued, but the fact that it was sort of a necessity is sometimes the best way to do something. And it's, once you figure out a few things, it's a pretty easy interface to use. In some ways, it's easier than YouTube. The layout on the screen isn't as useful for something like this, but I assume it's because it's primarily for gaming. So I'd like to try some game streams. I'm trying to figure out which games. I'm on a big kind of like builder strategy, like RimWorld, Prison Architect. I'm like, this is so nerdy. I'm binge watching Prison Break. I'd never seen the show before, and I'm like, it's the guy from Legends of Tomorrow. So I'm watching Captain Cold and Heatwave Escape from Prison. And there's a lot of people from Chicago Fire in this show too, because they share an executive producer, those shows. The showrunner on Chicago Fire. Whatever. Anyway, not important. But I think I will do some game streaming over on Twitch. Just to see how it goes. Like, who knows? I just have to figure out when is an appropriate time when people can actually watch and what games work best in that format. I can't play shooters for a super long time because of my hands. I do play them, but I don't play Fortnite and the stuff that's big on Twitch. I like, the nerdier games. So we'll figure it out. It'll be a process, and I'll probably start like, once every 2 weeks and work up or something like that. I like to do things that are reliable and not start and stop and start and stop. It's just my brain's too systemized for all that chaos. And while we're on the subject of chaos, E3. And I did my top and bottom, so I'm not going to go through that again. That turned into a 2-hour live stream where we got like philosophical and heavy, and that was really cool. But I just want to thank you guys for being really cool. Those were fun streams. People behaved. People had different opinions, but everybody acted like decent human beings. And it was in such sharp contrast to some of the things I saw in the media with, the Battlefield developers fighting with their own fan base and people going crazy about the Last of Us 2 trailer on political grounds. And it really got me thinking, dangerous. It really got me thinking about this idea of, the camp that everything is political, art is political, so gaming is political, and then the faction that I know most of you guys are more on the side of, which is keep your damn politics out of my games. And I've sort of realized this week that the two camps are actually using the term political in different ways. And it's kind of funny and sad at the same time, because I know, having had conversations with you guys, you don't want games that are just pablum all the time, right? You're fine with the Division 2 tackling certain issues as inspiration. You're fine with with games having like pandemics as a theme. I've seen some of your Steam things, so I know you play games like Democracy and Capitalism and things like that. I play them too. Um, what keep your don't politicize my games means to this camp, as I understand it, is like, Ellie's a lesbian, big deal. We've known that since the DLC. Can we please move on to the way the arrows scatter? Or, if you want to talk about the motion capture feat that was that kiss, that's fine. That's a technical thing. But there were a lot of interesting things in that trailer that don't have anything to do with a political theme. And what, this camp is saying is it's all become a political discussion instead of going, okay, there are these political themes. It may not be your bag, but here's the things it does well. Here's the things, it does not so well. And, I got frustrated on this point when people tried to fight me about Anthem after the EA press conference. And it was all on, female inclusion grounds and the fact that I just didn't like the host of the conference. And I don't understand why anybody wanted to shame me into changing my mind about that. First of all, with me, it doesn't work. Second of all, what does that accomplish? And it's like, I don't care how many women you put on that stage. If the game technically does not look good, it is not going to make me like it. And that's sort of what the keep your politics out of my games camp is really saying. Unfortunately, sorry guys, I'm slugging back liquid because my throat is killing me. I explained to the patrons why. It's kind of a funny, kind of a sad story. But of course, everything gets memeified, so it gets exaggerated. And what people are really, really saying, and I hate, so what you're really saying is, like, this, this has been memeified to the point of destruction. But what I'm hearing from people is just, if something seems like an appropriate political theme for a game, games have always had that, right? But don't put it where it doesn't belong. Don't insert modern geopolitics into Mario. Don't put adult sexuality into Mario or The Legend of Zelda. Don't turn Doom into some commentary on real world violence, because they're not. The very fact that you're slaughtering alien demons in Doom, the fact that they double other the enemies, is precisely the point. They're not human beings. This isn't connected to our day-to-day reality. Those of us who are sane know that. And some people with diagnosed mental health conditions who are still grown-ups. And the problem is, and this is why I went from The Last of Us 2 into this. I read an interview with Neil Druckmann where he talks about how he doesn't refer to fun. They don't refer to fun with The Last of Us. They refer to engagement. And I had this sort of knee-jerk, like, I don't like it as much anymore. And then I'm like, well, I see what he's saying. Like, from a development standpoint, it's a pretty bleak game. Like, you really can't say that the plot of The Last of Us is at all fun. It gets pretty bleak, but that's where you have to find the balance, right? I mean, if you don't feel at least a little bit powerful when you get good at that stealth mechanic, and which seems they're making improvements for the sequel that I'm very interested in. And I'm sorry that this isn't more front and center. And, credit where credit's due. I read this in a Kotaku article. So Kotaku, for a change, they snuck in references to politics, but they did cover actual game design principles and actual gameplay improvements for a change. So that was quite cool. But, I think you guys agree with me that you'd rather be talking about that and just how the themes of the games inform that than these heavy political messages. I mean, the idea of forced diversity came up, and I admit I don't I am still struggling to understand that concept, because that's another battle you're seeing in gaming. Like, this is sort of still the big culture war thing in gaming is one side goes, you hate diversity, and the other side is like, we don't hate diversity, we just don't want forced diversity. And I don't understand this forced diversity, because no one is forcing you to play any game. I do sort of get, like, what I get from that is that they feel like it's being rammed down their throat in places where it seems dissonant. So, if you want to say diversity dissonance, I think that's probably more accurate. It kicks you out of the game. It makes you think about it too hard. And that's valid. Anything that throws you out of it, anything that makes you analyze a game instead of experiencing a game, is a failure of game design. And I want to let you guys know, I talked to some community manager friends of mine, people like past and current, and nobody can figure out what Battlefield's doing fighting with its audience. That's usually a sign that a game is not coming along as well as they think it is. I mean, just look at BioWare of late. They throw inclusion at the wall as a smokescreen, but then their actual products. I mean, Inquisition technically was a fairly nice game. I want to remove that. But Dragon Age 2, it was very good for what it was, but it had an incredibly crunched development cycle. Mass 2 to a lesser degree. Mass 3 had that ending debacle. Mass Effect Andromeda had the "my face is tired" animations. There are obvious signs of cutting corners, especially on the Mass Effect side of BioWare, since they lost one of their founders. They lost Ray to the Old Republic debacle. And BioWare's never been the same ever since. They just don't have the same. Yes, they were always big on progressive values, but they were also hardcore gamers before, and more it seems like the slider on the allegedly progressive values. I would debate that some of the things they do in those games are not actually progressive at all. They're papering over some pretty authoritarian ideas, but the progressive slider's going up, but the actual, like, we want to make good games that can be enjoyed by a wide variety of people slider is actually going down. And that's kind of what I understand from the Battlefield thing as well, that people just want to understand Robot Arm Girl. And they're angry at the fact that it's so weird in a bad way. And it's weird because, it's all how you do it. It's all presentation. It's more art than science, because Death Stranding is weird as anything and everybody's cheering it. But I think that's because, first of all, it's Hideo Kojima, which that's what he does. He does weird, but it was weird from the beginning. We've bought into the weird, and we still kind of know what the game is about. Like, now we know it's a game about a guy who apparently can have babies and not die. And it seems very exploration heavy. It's very character heavy. And there's a mystery to it. We have a basic idea of what the game is. There's been a lot of gameplay on Death Stranding. I think we've seen a good 40 minutes of it at this point, because there's been 3. There was the trailer, and then there was the one released sort of midpoint, and then there was the one now. They've given us a lot of this game, whereas Battlefield and Anthem have not done that. And I think that's the difference, is that fans are responding to the confidence that Kojima Productions is showing with the way they're showing off this game. They're confident enough in their product that they'll show us a lot of it instead of the same damn trailer over and over and over again. They keep giving us new things to confuse the crap out of us. And all DICE would have to do with Battlefield is just say she's a resistance fighter or she's a civilian or nothing about this character is so important that it will spoil the play experience for someone. And at this point, a canny marketer would be, okay, we have to explain this character. Like, here's what she is. You know, if they came out and said, look, she's not an enlisted person, it's an informal role, this is sort of adjacent to the war, it's not actually an official battle, people would go, oh, all right, how she fires the gun still doesn't make sense, but at least they're not completely piking history. And that's all they'd have to do. Instead, they're getting indignant and aggressive. And if it was any other thing that confused players, like, what type of game is it? Can I play co-op? Is there multiplayer? And they withheld that information, people would rightly scream. So why not a confusing story point as well? I mean, I have the struggle with Gears, where I really like the idea that they're putting in a female gear in a meaningful role. I don't like Kate. I don't like the sum of the parts of that character, and it all comes down to the voice acting, that especially now you've got Puerto Ricans, people with like Puerto Rican accents playing both her parents. It's weird that she sounds like Laura Bailey, like her last name is Diaz. Why can't she sound like her last name is Diaz? Why can't she look a little rougher? Why does she have to have unblemished skin? I mean, at least they gave Ellie a couple of pimples over at Naughty Dog, right? Like, why is she so perfect in a world where everybody's scarred up because it's rough living? It seems dissonant to me. And I keep expecting, when I saw that character, I kept expecting her to sound kind of like America Ferrera or Rosie Perez. And so it's just every time she speaks, it sounds wrong to me. Now, does this make me a misogynist because I don't like one female character? No, I don't like this one character. And I don't like what it says about the direction. Her mom was a much better character. I loved her mom. I loved Reyna in Gears. I'm like, can she come back, please? She seems to fit. But it just seems like... And that's not even forced diversity. That's somebody chickening out on casting. And it's because some developers, unfortunately, have a fairly low opinion of the tolerance of their fan base. And that's, you've cultivated a not so great fan base when you do that. And that kind of brings me to the one video I did that was not about E3. It was about Steam, and I've got enough time to talk about this, so all right. I wasn't sure about making this video, but so many people asked me about it that in my fugue state after all that live streaming, I was like, all right, fucking fine. And there were some very interesting comments. Like, a lot of people agree in principle with Steam's decision to be hands off, but they're worried about quality control. So am I. But that has been a problem with Steam from the beginning. And my knee-jerk solution to it is that they should require an ESRB rating. You know, if you can't pay the $3,000 for, you know, an ESRB rating on your indie game, is it of sufficient quality to belong in the Steam store? You know, there are certain costs of making a game. If you want to sell on a platform like that, it should be rated, much like consoles. And they can allow an XO rating. They can allow adult games, but it needs to have a rating. That's one way to sort of allow quality control. I mean, the other... I don't think it should be left to user reviews, because that means somebody has to buy the game and think it's garbage, and I guess they can get refunds, but there will, for a period of time, be people spamming Steam with garbage to see what they can get away with, testing Steam's commitment to staying hands off. And they didn't say they're going to be totally hands off. If stuff is junk, they reserve the right to pull it. They never said anything about not vetting for quality. And that's what I find kind of strange. They are still reserving the right, if a game is a piece of garbage, they can still pull it. That has nothing to do with content. That is not content censorship. That is, this thing's broken, you shouldn't be charging money for it. Totally different thing. Totally different thing. And I don't. They have the right to do a certification process just like the consoles do. I don't know how some of these games get by the certification process, but that's neither here nor there. A frustration for me right now is that the PC market is getting kind of fragmented. Like, I've been playing fewer and fewer games on PC because I don't want Origin on my PC. And I like the Uplay perks. I like being able to, get a rabid bobblehead for my redneck truck in Far Cry, but I want as few background programs running in my PC as possible, so I play my Ubisoft games on console, because Uplay just interconnects with the PSN there. I don't have to put it on my computer. That means I don't play things like Anno anymore, which I like that game, but it's just when I repave my PC, it's like, no, I want minimal junk because I do video editing and stuff on this system. Performance matters, and all this shit going on in the background, even when it's allegedly not running, gums up the works. I don't want that crap on my PC. And I do check GOG a lot of the time because of their stance on DRM. A lot of people are saying, well, when's Steam going to go DRM free? It's not. If you want that experience, go to GOG. That's what GOG is for. Now, GOG does censor on content. It does. So, you have to pick your poison. Different companies, and this is a free speech principle as well. Steam is entitled to make any decision about what it has in its marketplace that it wants. If it had gone in a way that I didn't agree with, that is still their right. People have the right to buy based on somebody's corporate practices. That's the way free markets work. And I don't understand some of these, bigger names that are decrying Steam's decision. Just stop using Steam. Switch to GOG, that is a more heavily curated service. Well, guess what? That means you're not going to get certain games. But refuse to play those games. Just buy them on another format. More and more games are coming to GOG, like brand new. But, just play them on another format and you're fine. I think GOG's sort of censorship of adult content is a little bit hypocritical, because part of the reason so many people went to GOG is that CD Projekt backed it. So, love you on the DRM, GOG. Not so much on some of your censorship. But these are purchasing decisions that everybody has to make, and everybody has to make their own individual choices. And if everybody's thinking on behalf of the consumer, it gets harder and harder. But the reason people are thinking this way was outlined by this one commenter. And this is Feedback Friday, so I got to get to at least one comment directly. But what they said: it's quite simple why Steam has decided to stop policing their store. With some exceptions, they are responsible for any policing decisions. And virtually everything today is scrutinized heavily against the cult of identity politics. So it's better for them to just not engage in content policing at all, again with some exceptions, and let the gamers decide what they will and won't buy and play. Let the reviews paint the picture, though I'm sure Steam will moderate the reviews. A concept popular among the free-range kids movement is worst-first thinking. This is the part I thought was brilliant. Or having a worst-first mentality. Basically jumping to the worst possible outcome of a particular decision and acting as if it's the most likely outcome. For instance, letting kids play outside on their own means they will be kidnapped, molested, and killed. Forget any legitimate analysis of risk, which shows that if you live in the West, you're living in the safest years of all creation. And in response to Steam's decision is evidence the worst first mentality is very, very pervasive among society. jumping to the worst possible outcome and acting as if it's the most likely, interpreting something in the worst possible light, and acting if it's the most reasonable or legitimate interpretation. That does happen a lot in gaming. And on the one hand, I understand it's coming from the outside because of all these moral panics that gaming has had to suffer under over the years. But there also is this general, and it there's a term for it. It's mean world syndrome, and it comes from consuming a lot of mainstream media that tend to cultivate the idea that the world is far more unsafe than it actually is. That's what cultivation actually says. Not that media makes you violent, that media makes you think the world is more violent. That's actually what those landmark cultivation studies found. That people had a less trusting, more fearful view of the world the more and more media they watched. And so these people who seem to think media is actually more powerful and influential than it actually is, obviously watch a lot of it. And I could be saying it's more powerful and influential than it actually is, because I'm a moderate consumer of media, despite me being a pretty hardcore gamer. I do just sort of, tune out every so often. I watch a lot of news, but it's a lot more political news. I just like to know what's going on in the world from a business perspective. So it's less, if it bleeds, it leads local news. There's a mugging at the local convenience store or something like that. That's not the news I watch. I watch more cable news, which is larger social trends like BBC, Bloomberg, stuff like that, MSNBC, when I'm only half paying attention to it. But so I don't, and I'm also one of these people who forces myself to read statistics more than, let fear overcome me. So as much as there's part of my brain that's constantly going, there must be something to it. There must be something to violence cause of violence. No, I've seen the studies. There's been study after study after study after study after study after study that says violent media doesn't make a person violent. There has to be antisocial tendencies to begin with. And, the same with sex, the same with this and that. It's not one-to-one. There are other social factors that are far more powerful, like peer group and family and things like that. But not everybody does that. A lot of people are very, very emotionally driven. I know I am not typical about this. So this is, the emotional knee-jerking is something we do have to contend with. But I prefer to not be as dumb as the people I'm trying to sort of indirectly debate. Because you can't talk to these people directly. They won't. They're too invested in their narrative. And so as I was telling the patrons yesterday, the thing we did this week where we just got in a chat room like 100 people at a time, sometimes more, and just had fun and, analyze, scrutinize things. We talked about some pretty heavy topics this week, but it was fun. Like, it was beyond civil. It was engaged, and there was an exchange of ideas, and people talked about some pretty personal stuff, and I kept misgendering people, assuming that names were male when they were female and female when they were male, and one person turned out to be intersex, and, it happened. Nobody filed a human rights complaint. So, I think that's the most powerful thing we can do, is just, we're going to have conversations like fun-loving, reasonable people. And if people want to join those fun-loving, reasonable conversations in a fun-loving, reasonable way, they are welcome. Anybody can join a live stream anytime they want. Anybody can leave a comment, all that stuff. My attitude is, if they want to go on Reddit and be culture warriors and be miserable all the time, they can have it. I'm going to stand up for my principles. I'm going to stand up for gamers, because you guys have earned it. You guys have shown again and again and again and again that you know how to have fun in a respectful way. And there were a couple times where people got a little goofy about things and started getting uncomfortably political. And I just said, let's stick to games here. Thanks. Let's stick to discussion of the games. And they stopped. And that's all it should take. That's all it should take. So I consider it a successful experiment, other than YouTube temporarily shutting me down. But I'm going to continue to do that. I'm going to continue to just have open dialogue and say when I think someone's going over the line, not call them out by name, just say, hey, watch it. People at least have the opportunity again to amend their behavior before they're kicked or told they're a bad person. I think that's only fair. And it doesn't take that much to do. So thanks for being cool. Have a great weekend. Thanks for enjoying E3 with me. I was really touched by the number of people who said they found my coverage made it better, that they discovered things they otherwise wouldn't have watched, and it helped cut down on the boring quality of the slog. So thank you. Thank you for appreciating the content, and thank you for watching. Have a really good weekend.